Hello, everyone. So hopefully you had a good weekend. And let's see here. Trying to think what I'm welcome to our last week. It's our last week together. So what my plans for this week are we're gonna go over this. You will have a quiz. And I'm also going to post this week several little things to review for the EOC. I might post a review video. Still deciding on that. Also, there is something called the PLO test, and it's a 10-question test. I just want you to take straight up. It's basically you're going to get an automatic 100 for taking it. But what it does is it tells me what you've actually learned this semester and what you haven't learned and how can I can improve for next year teaching this course. So that's just a straight up automatic 100. I'll explain that a little bit more in the write-up on it itself in the my courses. But that's just, please take it and just be honest with it. Go through, answer the questions the best of your ability. If you get it right, you get it right. If you get it wrong, you get it wrong. You make a 100 regardless. So that's an auto 100, and that will go in your test grades, so your exam grades. So you get a 100 in your exam grades already. Win-win. And then, like I said, I'm gonna put up reviews for the final exam. And then I'm going to open the final exam on Friday, and it will close on Tuesday afternoon, May 9th. So that way you've got all weekend to get in there and get her done. And then when it closes on the afternoon of May 9th, that way I can get the grades in. And if you need anything reopened, talk to me. Like email me, hit me and remind if you need anything reopened to, if you got a 0 on anything, get her done. Because everything shuts May 9th, that afternoon. So don't contact me after May 9th and go, hey, I really need to retake this, or I really forgot to do this. I get you, understand, but that's the dead deadline. I'm not stuttering there. We're done. So if you need to go back and get things done and other stuff like that, yeah, May 9th is your cutoff for that, because I've got to get the grades in that next day. And I usually try to get the grades in before noon because I want to be done with the grades instantaneously. So you have the grades and I have the grades and the school has the grades, and the school doesn't hunt me and like skin me for not getting the grades in. So please, if you need to go back and get things done, May 9th is your deadline, my friends. And if you need something reopened, let me know. And yeah, I'll work with you on that. Okay. All right. So just, give me a heads up, talk to me, email me, message me, remind me, come over to the lab, say hi to Monty, stuff like that. All right. With that said, we're kind of this is kind of weird because I'm bouncing around the last couple of chapters. So we're gonna end chapter 54 because, like I said, I didn't like how they split it between the end of 54 and the beginning of 55. So we're gonna bounce around. I'm gonna touch on some things in 54. I'm gonna touch on some things in 55, and then I'm gonna touch on some things in 56, and then we're gonna call it bueno. We're done. So like I said, I'm just going to touch on the things that I feel are important, and I'm not really going to hit those chapters like psycho hard. So don't sit there and go, oh god, she's going to go crazy. Some of this, the thing with ecology, and this is something that you got to understand, the ecology is a lot of applied science, and it's something you can't, you can get, and your book does do a very good job of being long-winded on a lot of concepts. And I try to edit that down so that way you're not going, bleh. But ecology is best studied in the field. And then what you do is you collect data, you bring it back to your computer station, and you sit there and you just make models and make models. You just do modeling constantly. And we'll talk about this in this lecture today. And then you go back out into the field, you get data, and then you come back and you crunch the numbers again and make models, and, crunch numbers, make models, crunch numbers, make spreadsheets. And then you're back out again, in the field. So it's a lot of applied things that you kind of learn better, not from a textbook like this, but like if you're in, actually doing ecology. And that's basically why it's like sometimes I'm sitting there, hopefully explaining this, but at the same time, it's like, God, I wish we were out. We had a lab together and we were out, because as much as I do enjoy the convenience of online classes, I do very much miss being able to go out and show you hands-on stuff, because that's really important, especially with ecology. It's a very hands-on, and then you're back in front of a computer crunching numbers. That's literally what ecology is. You're out in the field, boots on the ground, getting data, then you go back, crunch numbers for several weeks, and then you're back out in the field getting numbers, crunch data, and then you go right back to crunching data for several weeks in your office. So ecology's fun, but it's you have to experience it to really get a better grasp on the whole situation. So it's a lot of number crunching. And the things is, it's always changing. That's another thing. It's like your book doesn't quite illustrate that as well, I feel. In that ecology, it's like some of these models and everything that they're talking about will change in a couple of years, because the universe likes to throw curveballs at us all the time, and ecology is constantly tweaking, constantly figuring out new little things that are going on. So, that's why I'm giving you a broad view. But if you're more interested, definitely take an ecology class. It's fun, because it's a lot more hands-on and out there, but then you're back in the lab crunching numbers until you cry. Which is actually most of science, really. It's like you going out, getting all the data in the field, and then coming back and basically making sense of it. So that's science in a nutshell. So anyway, so we're talking about ecosystems today. And like I said, I didn't like how your book kind of split this. So I'm kind of rearranging some of these. So anyway, an ecosystem is a community of living organisms and their interactions with their abiotic or non-living environment. So an equilibrium is a steady state of an ecosystem where all the organisms are in balance with their environment and each other. So everything's happy, and it's like, this is like the Fern Gully. I don't know if anybody remembers the movie Fern Gully. That used to be my, and then James Cameron made the first Avatar movie, and I don't mean Avatar: The Last Airbender. I mean the blue kitty people CGI stuff, which to me, when I finally got to watch that movie for the first time, I haven't seen the second one yet. No, I'm not sure if I want to or not. Lost its luster, because like I said, when I sat down and watched it, it just felt like Fern Gully rehashed. And Fern Gully, I feel like, did a better job because it had Robin Williams in it. So anyway, but basically, yeah, everything's in balance with each other. All the organisms are interacting properly, and nobody's upsetting this insanity. However, there's two things that measure or use to measure changes in ecosystems, because stuff happens. We live in a very changing, variable world, and even for human populations, stuff happens. Earthquakes happens, depending on where you live, things happen. So, and that brings us to resistance and resilience. Resistance is the ability of an ecosystem to maintain equilibrium in spite of disturbances, in spite of things coming in, like people, coming in and chopping down trees, or an earthquake happening, or a forest fire. But resilience is the speed at which an ecosystem recovers after being disturbed, like how it bounces back after a forest fire. And like some plants and some animals are actually built for, not so much animals, but some plants are actually built for being burnt every season, which is interesting if you look at the ecosystem of California, the parts that are usually on fire all the time. It's just that technically that's kind of an ecosystem that's always been driven by fire. And we just decided to, build mansions inside there and been like, yeah, okay. And oh no, it's on fire. Why is it on fire? And it's like, because you built in an ecosystem that's literally based on fire. Because some of those scrub trees and whatnot, their seeds actually have to be burnt for them to be viable afterwards and for them to grow. So some ecosystems, their equilibrium is literally building in the disturbances like fire and whatnot. So some of the fire is quite normal in California, although at the same time, humans living there and diverting water every which way has unfortunately made it worse. So yeah, humans poking ecosystems have always not always worked out in the way ecosystems have, and sometimes have blown up in our faces. Like I gave you the the example of the Dust Bowl during the Great Depression, because we decided to chop up all the the grasslands and got rid of all the root systems, and all of a sudden there's this very silty dirt that's being blown about by windstorms and it's covering everything, and all the plants are dead. So good going us. Anyway, we do that a lot. So anyway, the study of changes in an ecosystem and ecosystem structure basically, or by internal forces, is called ecosystem dynamics. And ecosystems are characterized using a variety of research methodologies. Some ecologists use ecosystems as controlled experimental systems. Will sometimes they'll go out and they'll study it in their natural state. And some people use both approaches. Some people will make a computer program to try and simulate what they're seeing out there and seeing if it matches up or seeing if it doesn't match up with their predictions. So there's a lot of interesting intersections of interdisciplinary things going on in ecology. It's like, yeah, we get people who do, computer programming and bring them in for ecology to help us figure out how to model these ecosystems and whatnot, what possible changes could happen. Like if you go in to this one area and bulldoze all the trees down to put in like a mini house development, because that seems to be the new thing right now. So let's all live in a mini house. Anyway, yeah, so that's so there's a lot of people that can come in and work on ecology, not just biologists and ecologists. So and we do this a lot when we're doing planning these days. There's a lot of ecologists that are brought in when we're doing big planning for big complexes and what the biological impact is on the land. And like if I build a giant mall in the middle of, or a golf course, they do impact studies, and this is where this kind of comes in, these ecosystem dynamics and these studies and all these different models, and I'll get into some of the models in a minute. And like I said, these are just examples. I'm just touching on things really quickly because, like I said, this is more of one of those hands-on things, so it's more helpful to understand when you're in the thick of it than reading a book and getting it explained. So this brings me to how ecosystems react to change. So there's something called ecological succession, which is a process by which the mix of species and habitat in an area changes over time. And there's two flavors of this. There's primary succession and there's secondary succession. So primary succession is basically when we start from the beginning. So say that a new patch of land rises from the ocean from plate tectonics and volcanic, so there's a volcano, undersea volcano, and it builds up and breaches the top of the ocean, and all of a sudden you have a brand new island. And this actually happens. We do get brand new islands quite often, just from tectonic and undersea volcanoes building up, and it's an island. I mean, where do you think we got Hawaii? They're volcanoes. Don't make them mad. I'll get into that story a little later. Do not make the volcanoes in Hawaii mad. They'll actually curse you. It's actually kind of interesting. I'll get to that story in a minute. So anyway, so you've got this brand new bare rock, and what happens is you first get these pioneer species that come in. These are the species that are first to show up on the scene and try to colonize the land. And the first one that usually shows up in primary succession are lichens. So lichens, again, they've spread out over and they've landed, and they're just like, oh, this is so nice. Nobody's here. It's just us. And so they start breaking down, eating up those fresh minerals from the volcanic rock. And they start breaking it down, turn it into soil. And given, again, this is happening over hundreds of years. This is not like overnight. So over time, very long time, we've got more dirt. Because more dirt, we've got more wind species. So small annual plants and lichens start, spreading out, diversifying. And then it turns into grasslands and perennials. From there, this is where you see the scrub brushes and the pine trees start moving in. So the gymnosperms start moving in. So these are grasses, shrubs, and shade intolerant trees such as pines. And so that lets you know that this is this is an intermediate species. Usually if you see a pine forest, that means that it's been disturbed in the past and it hasn't hit its climax community yet. Because if you see a pine forest, that usually means something happened and the oaks and the older trees are gone, like the oaks and the hickories. They're called shade tolerant trees. So the angiosperms, basically, the angiosperms usually take over at the peak. And so basically, if you're looking at a pine forest, it's like, oh, so this is we're not here at the climax yet, because those pines are going to give way eventually to older trees that hang out longer, like oaks and hickories, and there are other pines that live very long. I mean, heck, go look at the sequoias, long old ones. But anyway, so then it goes into a climax community at the end, where basically we get ye olde trees like oaks, hickories, chestnuts. Like when we first, came, the settlers first came to the shores of North America, and the Native Americans are like, where'd you come from? We had, these mountains were covered in chestnut trees. I mean, the chestnut trees, it was like, 5 men, fingertip to fingertip, going around some of those trees. Those are the old trees. And we used to, the wormy chestnut around here, there's buildings still built just straight out of that wormy chestnut, just one tree. It was amazing stuff. Unfortunately, we've chopped it all down, and then the chestnut blight didn't freaking help at all. Anyway, so, and the chestnut blight actually came from Asian countries that we kind of accidentally brought over here with some other stuff. So that was all our fault, really. So yeah, the chestnuts in this area were just absolutely amazing. So anyway, so that's basically primary succession, where we go from brand new patch of land to full thriving community. It takes hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. This is not quick. But basically, this also mimics how plants basically came up and took over on the land before, the rest of the kingdoms got their act together and actually came up out and said, oh, look, there's this lovely land that's all been prepared for us by the plants. And the plants are looking at us going, ew. Anyway, so I wonder if that's what happens. Like, some of the first, fish amphibians popping out going, wow, this is so nice. And the insects popping out going, oh, wow, this is so nice. And the plants just going, oh, God, what are those? So anyway, secondary succession is basically a disturbance happens. So like a forest fire. So a forest fire comes in, destroys that climax community, and nothing's left. Well, year 0, and you can see this at the after effect of, hey, we had a forest fire ourselves a while back, the Chimney Rock fires, and you can see that in some places around here. So 0 years is basically nothing but ash. There's not a lot left, but it's kind of technically all in the soil. And then from 1 to 2 years, you start seeing again the small guys, the small annual plants are popping back in, because they're just like, hey, fresh start. And again, you'll see the grasses and perennials after 3 to 4 years. Like, imagine a parking lot. I mean, have you ever seen a parking lot just go to pot? Nobody uses it forever and a day. And because of that, all of a sudden, suddenly it's got, the mosses everywhere in between the cracks and whatnot. And all of a sudden the grasses are poking up through oh God, what is it? The concrete. And then between 5 to 150 years, you get the grasses, the shrubs, the pines, the young oak, and the hickories are popping in. So again, those intermediate species like the pines and the scrubs. And then finally, after 150 plus years, you get a mature oak and hickory forest yet again. So it takes a while, it bounces back. So this is what primary succession and secondary succession is. And I actually did a study on that once. I and a team had to plan out, we were getting this block of land bequeathed to the college, and one of my ecology courses, and they were just like, well, plan out how you're going to test secondary succession happening in this, block of land. And so we all, different groups proposed different things, although it ended up being the same thing that we all proposed, because the professors weren't very clear on their instructions, and they were like, this is weird. So remember, if you ever go into education, try to be clear with your instructions to your students, which is something I still have to remind myself of daily, because, we've all had that one teacher where you're like, been there, done that, been there, did that. Anyway, I'm trying to fix myself. Anyway, so again, that's the difference between primary succession and secondary succession. It's actually really fascinating to study, and you can see this. You can see this like in places where Mother Nature is reclaiming things we built. I like watching a couple of there's a couple of like what is it they call it urbex channels that I really enjoy watching. Like The Proper People, where they go into abandoned places and see how Mother Nature is reclaiming some of these buildings that are just left there. Another one is Bright Sun Films, where they do the abandoned. These are YouTube videos or YouTube channels. They're a lot of fun. I love watching those. It's interesting to see where time has stopped when humans were there. And then when, you go back and look at how Mother Nature has reclaimed some of this stuff, and what's left and what's not. It's interesting. It's really interesting. I kind of like that. Just looking at that. Anyway, so let's talk about models. So a holistic ecosystem model attempts to quantify the composition, interaction, and dynamics of an ecosystem. So basically, the representative of an ecosystem in its natural state. So a food web is actually an example of a holistic ecosystem model. However, it's limited by time and expense, as well as the fact that it's not really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do experiments on large ecosystems, and it's not very ethical, because the last thing you want to get in there and doing experiments is completely screw it up. You don't want to completely destroy it by studying it. So that's where, we've got the stressors. So things that could stress it out, habitat, where it is, effects of what's going on it, and impacts. So like sources of like dams, we had to figure this out the hard way. It's actually why we have to flood the Colorado basin quite a bit, the Colorado River basin, using all the dams we put in. We put in these dams, and it restricted the flow of water, kind of like what I was talking about last week with the beavers versus the DOT, and straightening the streams. Streams are not supposed to be straight. So same thing, we put in these dams, these big hydroelectric dams, and it basically breaks the water down to a trickle. And what we didn't realize is that there's a natural flow to like rivers like the Colorado. Like during the rainy season, it literally floods the Colorado and pushes everything down. And remember, we talked about this too when we talked about ocean upwelling and stuff like that, that sometimes we get going with the currents and it brushes up the top, and it spins the nutrients around, so that way creatures in upper levels of the ocean are getting nutrients that if this wasn't happening, it'd be all at the bottom and nothing could be alive in the ocean. And so that ocean upwelling is very important. Well, this is also important in river systems, and in the Colorado, it would flood, like the Nile would flood. A lot of river systems have a flooding period, and that's where it takes all the stuff on the bottom of the river and picks it up and moves it down. But it also, again, gets a nice mixing, so that way more nutrients are getting flowing down the river, so that way more creatures can live off those nutrients that are now getting stirred up from the flood. Or the push and the more volume of water getting pushed down, so that's stirring everything up. And again, we need those nutrients stirred up every so often to keep the river nice and healthy with all the life that's inside the river, just like the ocean, just like everything else. So the problem is when we put up dams that effectively stop that flooding cycle, and then again, once again, we're looking downstream going, why are all the fish dead? And which is But again, it's because we stopped the natural cycle. So now that we've learned that, now what we do is in certain times of the year, we actually open all the gates to the dams. So it lets the water flood and push and push and push. And you see this across all dams in the United States. We now know that, yeah, we've got to occasionally just open up the gates and let it whoosh out the bottom to simulate that flooding thing. So that way the river ecosystem downstream from the dam is now restored, and that upwelling, again, that cycling of the nutrients that settle on the bottom of the river is now being stirred up again, and creatures are living and feeding off of this. So yeah, it's really interesting to see how over the years we've been learning ecology and these impacts of our structures on things, that we need to be able to, when we put up a dam, we need to be able to mimic what's going on with what's happening downstream in the river. So you'll see that sometimes, especially in the spring, because that's usually when it's happening. Think about it, the melt from, the snow on the mountains comes down, and it also makes all the kayakers really happy because they get their happy rapids. No offense. I mean, if you're into kayaking, you rock, because I can't get a kayak. I canoe. I can't kayak worth a potato. But anyway, so I'm just saying. But at the same time, it's like, rapids make me go, yeah, I don't like drowning. Anyway, so if you're good at it, cool. If you're bad at it. Anyway, so like I said, dams, we had to learn over time. Damming up every river, not maybe the best idea. It does give us hydroelectric power, which is good, but at the same time, we have to mimic life in the ocean, or not the ocean. Oh boy, the river. So that way, we can get those nutrients all stirred up. So urban centers, again, this affects water quality, which can mess up, habitats around it. Agriculture, same thing. We can habitat alterations if we, go in and do certain things. And this is something that it's like, we've got to be very careful. And this is something that's backlash that we're feeling right now with our pollinators, with bees, save the bees. Well, it's also our natural pollinators too. Because what's happening is we've been, pumping insecticide all over our crops, so that way insects aren't eating our crops. But the problem is also kills our pollinators. And we need the pollinators to pollinate our crops, or else we don't get food. But we need to use insecticide to kill the bugs that eats our crops, so we get crops. And the problem is they're kind of the same biology. So that's what we're hitting right now. We're really hitting hard. Oh shoot, we've been, pumping all these insecticides for so many years. And yeah, it's been affecting the pollinator population, which is not good. We need them. We need them desperately. So we need one set of bugs, but not the other set of bugs. Yeah, it's now we have to sit there and rethink just using constant insecticides, because it's like we need our pollinators, but we also don't want the guys up and eating our food before we can get to it. So it's a now we're hitting that, and that's a major stressor on an ecosystem, and it's something we've got to figure out. It's like, how do we save our pollinators but still save our crops from insects that are eating it? So yeah. Climate change, we're going to get into that. I've got a whole spiel on that in a minute, and actually some interesting things to tell you about. So again, loss of biodiversity, insufficient water for basic needs of the communities, especially with concrete. Concrete diverts a lot of groundwater, which is not good, because we need water to go back into the ground to fill up these underground areas of water. Now, I say underground areas of water, I am not talking about cool caves filled with water. They're called aquifers, and they're zones where basically if you dig down, you're just hitting wet soil 24/7. It's where the water likes to hang out under the ground, and it's usually all in between the dirt and everything. And so it's not like cool. I say aquifer, and there's some person, and I call that, groundwater, but somebody's sitting there going, cool underwater cave, which is cool. And we do have those, but the largest aquifer actually goes through the middle of our country. It's called the Ogallala Aquifer. It's absolutely huge. But the problem is we need water to go back in, like when it rains for like the past several days, like it did this week. Because I'm recording on Friday again. So yeah, and concrete inhibits that. Concrete doesn't let the water go back down into the ground like it should. So yeah, too much concrete means no recharging of the aquifer, means no support for the community, the ecosystem living above that. So it's again, we've got to look at all these different things. Same thing with the West. It's California, bring that up again. Insufficient water for agriculture. Yeah, well, yeah, that they have a major water issue out there, and that they don't have enough water. This is why the Colorado River has been diverted so badly out of Nevada and whatnot. There's actually fights over water rights between the states, depending on where the water's coming from, because you're basically have all these farms in California, but they're up in areas that naturally it's good farming land, but at the same time, it wasn't originally supposed to be farming land because there's not a lot of water. So they steal water from other places. And unfortunately, that's why they have droughts all the time, is because they're kind of misusing their water. It's a hot mess. Trust me. Learning about ecosystems and water usage out west is just absolutely insane, but it could become a problem for the rest of the country if things continue as it does. It's so I'm like water's a major concern going into the future and how we use it. So anyway, so this brings me to microcosms and mesocosms. So basically, experimental systems usually involve partitioning a part of the ecosystem apart from the rest of it, which can be used for experiments so we can learn more about. And so if it's a big area of recreating an ecosystem, so if it's part of the natural world and you go out and you're looking at something like an artificial pond and seeing what's going on in it, and it's a big one that that you've built, it's something like that, and you're trying to follow it. It's called a mesocosmos. So it's a big version of, like, say we're trying to mimic a lake, but we're using this artificial pond. Now, if you're trying to do it in the lab in highly controlled laboratory conditions, again, because there's certain variables that you need to be able to control, and when you're doing the scientific method and whatnot, you use a microcosm. So that's where the word microcosm came from. It's basically we're trying to recreate what we see in like a large body of like water, like an ocean, or even just a large patch of land, but we're trying to do it in a terrarium. And that would be a microcosm because we're controlling every part of it in a lab. And sometimes you don't get, you can figure some things out, but sometimes you need it a little bit bigger. And that's when you go outside and build, like an artificial pond. Or we did this thing called Earth 2, where we tried to recreate different parts of the climate of the Earth in one big building. You should look up that one time. It was our way to try and study how humans survive away from everything else, but it failed like twice. Look it up sometime. Earth 2. And not the TV show. There's a TV show called Earth 2 too. Yeah, let me Google it for you. It was really interesting and kind of a screwed up. It was not good science, but it was interesting. Earth 2, not the TV show. Earth 2? Follow me? Follow me. Ellie? No, not the TV show. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'm thinking the TV show. What was the name of it? It's out in Nevada. I swear to God. Indoor ecosystem experiment with humans. Biosphere 2. Sorry. I knew it had a 2 in it. See, now I would have. This is a good thing I looked it up. So anyway, Biosphere 2 is weird. It was the largest closed system ever created about recreating our ecosystems. And it was, and you can see it. Yep, it's Arizona, not Nevada. not really close. Anyway, so it was interesting. It's basically, and it's still part of the was a research facility today, but it's a part of the Arizona, University of Arizona, I think. Oh yeah, University of Arizona. And it was built between 87 and 91. And it was basically meant a viability of closed ecological systems to maintain human life in outer space as a substitute for Earth's biosphere. And it had different biomes in it. It was really neat looking. It still is. Unfortunately, parts of it have been dismantled since then. But it had 7 biome areas. It had a rainforest. It had an ocean with a coral reef. It had wetlands. It had savanna grassland. It had a fog desert, agricultural system, and human habitat. And it was just watch some videos about it. It was really interesting. Unfortunately, what they were going to do, yeah, here it is. Isn't that pretty? It's so neat looking. Anyway, and they had big plans for it because they were just going to lock people in. They were going to do closed missions where they lock, people in and see how they live, apart from being outside. And neither of them worked, which is so sad. So it really didn't work. And they were making 83% of the total diet, including crops of bananas. Yeah, it was interesting. Read through it. So they had 2 group psychology, conflict, cooperation. They had crews that were it was interesting. So they were locked in there for a certain time to see if they could survive apart from everybody else, to see if we could replicate that before we went and tried to build these places up in space. So it was interesting. And again, it was a big thing to kind of show how ecosystems worked. So they were the keystone predators, the people in there, but it was interesting. They made the desert too wet. They had explosions of greenhouse ants and cockroaches, because cockroaches can get into everything. And morning glories apparently just went bonkers. So yeah, it was trying to figure out how to create another ecosystem. The second mission, I think, lasted even shorter than the first mission. And somebody got hurt. It was weird. It was really weird. Read through it, watch a video about it sometime. Biosphere 2 was really interesting. Then it was Columbia University owned it for a while, and now Arizona, University of Arizona. Science camps are held there. You can go on a week-long space camp. I'd love to. It'd be cool. So we've had a lot of research in it. Taught us about quite a bit in how we really need to. Yeah, this is what it is in 2015. Isn't that neat looking? It's just so cool. Yeah, there's the kitchen. Nice looking kitchen. It's cool. There's a rainforest part. There's the desert part. There's the oceany part. There's the outside. Isn't that neat? It's so cool. I'd love to go visit it sometime. There's a lot of places I want to go visit. I really need to get on that, don't I? All right, so there you go, Cosmos and Biosphere 2. I should put in a slide about that. Anyway, so there's basically 3 basic types of ecosystem modeling. There's for research and ecosystem management, a conceptual model, an analytical model, and a simulation model. So conceptual models are used for describing ecosystem structure and dynamics, for demonstrating relationships between organisms. And usually these are like flow charts that you see. Analytical models are usually like food chains. They're mathematically complex. They usually have a lot of math going into, hence the word analytical in it, analyze. So a lot of math in these analytical model. Trust me, if you go into this line of research, I assure you, you'll be doing a lot of math. So if you're good at math, may you consider doing analytical models in ecology. Recent development, simulation modeling. This is using computers to basically create larger simulations, so that way we can run big ones without ruining an actual one, or building a huge 7-system biome, in the middle of Nevada, or Arizona. So Yeah. Why do I keep hanging on Nevada? I don't know why. I've got Nevada on the brain, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, so we're using computers to basically run things, and so build a ecosystem in a computer, and then see if that mimics real life, and if it doesn't, where did we go wrong, and figure out things that way without ruining an ecosystem by studying it. So again, this is just an overview real quick because, like I said, we talked about this already a couple of times. So you got it: food webs, food chains, the different levels. Now, I mentioned last week that there is energy between these levels, and so that's what we're going to get into now. And I just did not like how your book started it in chapter 54 and then finished it in chapter 55, and they should put it together, and so should have I might do that again if I edit these notes again for next year. But anyway, so food pyramids showed changes in available energy from one trophic level on a food chain, and energy enters the first trophic level producers where there's a large amount of biomass and therefore a lot of energy. However, it takes large quantities of organisms in one trophic level to meet the energy needs in the next. You lose a ton of energy between each level, like upwards of 10%. So only 10% of energy is going, I mean, you lose about 90%. Only 10% is going to the next level up. So if you see that right here, so we've got our producers, so we got our decomposers, but they're just eating all your decomposing stuff. So they're kind of like in it, but not really. But anyway, you got your primary producers right here. Only about 10% is going to the next level, which is the primary consumer. So look at that. You go from 10,000 kilocalories a year that these guys are producing, and they only get the next level up. Heterotrophs only get 1,000 kilocalories. That's a loss. That's only like an 80 to 90% loss right there. And then same thing, you jump from the 1,000 calories in the heterotrophs, and you go to the heterotrophs, that are omnivores. Boom, they're only getting 100 kilocalories a year out of this level. And then boom, the tertiary consumers they're only getting 10 kilocalories a year. So that's why predators are constantly on the move trying to eat, because they're not getting a lot of food a lot of energy out of their prey items. So yeah, so the energy lost at each level is insane. We're losing it constantly through basic processes of living. Like, for instance, we lose a lot of energy through heat. Constantly we're giving off heat. That's why, hopefully your mom told you, when it's cold outside, put your hat on, or at least, I don't know, I lived up north, so that's, my mom was everybody constantly, put your hat on, you're losing heat through your head. I hate wearing winter hats, so I was one of those kids that was like ripped right the minute we got out. I don't care if my head was cold. I did not like wearing wool hats. It makes my head itch. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, so there's very little energy left over for growth or increase in biomass, which is why, animals, again, going back to that conversation a couple of weeks ago, animals have to sit there and make choices based on their energy consumption. All right, do I have enough energy to have a kid, or do I not? This is where, when you see increase in resources, is when there's an increase in reproduction. Like if you ever watched, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom or anything like that, or, because they go into how, the wet season comes around and the African savanna, and all of a sudden everybody's having kids because there's an increase of food, which, because all the wetness, all the plants are growing, because all the plants are growing, all the primary consumers are eating and having kids, and then all of a sudden all the predators are eating and having kids because they're eating more, more and more. And so everybody has a lot of kids during that time because there's a lot of energy going into the system because it's rainy season. But then the dry season hits, and you don't see any reproduction happening on, the consumers, the primaries and the secondaries and the tertiaries, because they're conserving energy just to live. So there's a lot of energy loss between, and some of the energy, and you can actually measure the energy with math. And this is weird because your book doesn't even touch on this. And I'm just showing it to you. I'm not going to beat you with it or anything like that, but I'm just showing it to you. So there is measurement for energy transfer between trophic levels, and those trophic level energy is called trophic level transfer efficiency. So TLTE, because, that's easy to remember. Anyway, it's defined by this formula right here. And then you get net production efficiency, which basically allows us to quantify how good some organisms are at receiving energy from the biomass around them. And you can do that right there with that calculation, but I'm not going to do it too hard because, like I said, your book goes into some other things, and it goes into some other math that I'm not touching because, like I said, ecology math changes quite often. So I'm not really going to go crazy on that because, heck, next year that could be out of date. That's the problem with some biology texts, and it's not just general biology, it's other things too. With the exception of anatomy and physiology, we don't make that many discoveries about our body, other than we do, but not, when it comes to muscle attached to bone, we got that one down. Anyway, so yeah, there's bit by bits, but there's some courses it goes fast because book updates. I mean, some of these some things in this book are already outdated, which is crazy to think about. And that's why research very important. Anyway, net consumer productivity. So this is basically the energy content available to organisms on the next trophic level. And you'll notice down here it says assimilation. Well, what's assimilation? And that is the biomass of energy content generated per unit area of the present trophic level after accounting for energy loss due to a lot of different things in our body. Our bodies are not perfectly perfect. So, like, for me, I'm kind of, big floppy thing because I'm not very efficient. I could be more efficient if I lost weight and actually kept exercising. And some of you are very efficient because you do exercise all the time and you keep yourself in good shape. And that's good because I don't. And, so we don't, always digest our food perfectly. I mean, we've all been to Taco Bell. We know what that means. Energy used for respiration, which is constantly, we're always making ATP, but we're also not that efficient at it. If you remember from last semester, if your instructor told you, we, on a good day, a mitochondria can pump out, 38 ATP for every cycle. But that's at the high end. It's usually not doing 38 ATP every single cycle. So, it could be pumping out less than that. So even our own mitochondria, depending on, it's a good day or not, you're not pumping out the, true amount of ATP you should be pumping out. And there's no way to really control that. No amount of exercising is going to make your mitochondria suddenly more efficient. That's just life. So, lion kills an antelope, will eat everything except the hide and the bones. The lion is missing energy-rich bone marrow. So he doesn't make use of all the calories, and a lot of it's left, and that's why we get animals coming over and picking off. Or our Monty actually, his intestines are way more efficient than our intestines. His intestines, because he just ate last night, so he's passed out right now. But when I feed him a rat, and it's already dead because he's big fat baby and he's a baby. Anyway, so he ate a rat last night. And his intestines are all so strong that he can actually, when he's digesting that rat, he's actually sucking the calcium out of the bones. Our intestines can't do that. Like if we eat, if we chew on a bone or something like that, or accidentally swallow something, and it doesn't stick, thank goodness. But you know what I mean? Something gets in there and you're like, and it goes through. Yeah, it doesn't, we don't have the power to suck out the calcium out of bones like Monty does. So that's why Monty can eat a whole rat and actually be very efficient with the energy coming out. But us humans, yeah, not so much. So, because we don't have to be like Monty. He's cold-blooded, we're warm-blooded. We work on different wavelengths in a way. So anyway, so there's a lot of things we just leave alone that we're not being very efficient with, that some species are really efficient and some species just aren't. And sometimes we don't have to be. So again, NPE basically measures how efficient each trophic level incorporates energy from its food into the biomass fuel for the next level. Like in general, cold-blooded animals like Monty use less energy they obtain from respiration and heat than us warm animals. We're using a ton of energy all the time, which is why we need to eat all the time compared to Monty, who eats like every other week, depending on his mood and what the weather's like. Like, he decided not to eat for a month. I kept offering him mice and he was just like, no, I'm not interested. And then finally today I fed him, and last week I fed him and he was just like, oh yay, and he was hungry again. So it just depends. Unlike us, it's like, I'm sorry, there's days I wake up and I'm starving, and then there's other days I'm sitting there going, when you stand in front of the refrigerator open going, I don't know what I want to eat anyway. So there you go. So we take advantage of this because we can survive in colder climates. They can't. So that's why, you see us in colder climates and you don't see snakes in colder climates. It's funny that, was it St. Patrick who got all the snakes out of Ireland? Well, FYI, joke's on us. They didn't need a saint to do it because it's too cold in Ireland for snakes to be there in the first place. So that's why there's no snakes in Ireland. Nothing to do with the saint. However, there is something called biomagnification and bioaccumulation, which basically is all the things that's being moved up. Energy isn't the only thing. And sometimes it's levels of like pesticides, insecticides, basically things we put in. And unfortunately, it magnifies over time. So pollutants can actually saturate in creatures, and then we can get it, and then it can kill us. And we saw major problems with this where it magnified and bioaccumulated, like plastics. Like right now, a major thing is plastics. There's a lot of plastics hanging out in the guts of a lot of fish because there's that whole plastic island continent almost out in the middle of the Atlantic, I believe. Yeah, I think it's the Atlantic. What is it, that plastic pile in the Atlantic? Plastic pile in an ocean. Plastic garbage pile in the Pacific. Oh, it's in the Pacific. Yeah, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Yeah, that's fun. Oh God, there's an Eastern garbage patch and a Western garbage patch. Oh, I did not know that. Witness your teacher just learning that we have more than one garbage patch. Oh my God. Anyway, that's nice. So basically, yeah, all this plastic that's just floating around from pretty much everybody dumping in the ocean. And it's not just America, it's everybody. And the currents are basically swirling it around and making it, converge in different places. So, yeah, so, the fish are going to get into that. They're going to, fish are not the most brilliant things on earth. They're smart, actually. We found out goldfish are way smarter than we give them credit for. There was a guy on YouTube that trained his goldfish to do tricks. And you can too. You can actually train goldfish to do things. It's actually kind of cool. But unfortunately, what happens is all those polycolored PCBs, they're absorbed up into the plankton. And then, of course, the fish, small fish, eat the zooplankton, eat a ton of the zooplankton. And because these guys are all carrying a little bit and these guys are eating a ton of them, all that stuff builds up inside of them. It magnifies. And then, again, it moves up. So bigger fish eat the smaller fish. And again, they're picking up all this that's building up inside of them, and it builds up more inside of them. And then finally the apex predators come in, like our orca, and then they have a ton of the plastic sitting in their gut and it's killing them. And that's not just the microplastics and whatnot. It's also, this was why, what was that one thing that was killing the eagle shells? I want to say, my brain keeps kicking out the wrong thing. It was DCT. Eagle shell. Yeah. Oh God, they're being poisoned from lead from ammunition. DDT, that's it. There we go. DDT. So DDT. So what happened with DDT? This is bioaccumulation. So we were using DDT to kill off pretty much mosquitoes. We couldn't stand mosquitoes, and DDT was great. And we just drive past with trucks and they just blow out DDT just to kill the population, like especially in Florida. Florida's really bad for mosquitoes because it's a swamp. Sorry, Florida, you're a swamp with the mouse kingdom in the middle, but you're a swamp. And we used to just blow DDT into the air everywhere to kill off them. But unfortunately, all that DDT that wasn't killing, gets into the ground, and the rain saturates it into the ground, and then it goes into the water, into the waterways, and then it starts absorbing into the fish, and the fish start absorbing it. And it wasn't really bothering the fish, so that was absorbing all this DDT, all this DDT, all this DDT. So again, bioaccumulations, it was building up, building up, building up in the fish that were living in the water that was contaminated with the DDT. And then what eats fish? Well, birds, big birds. So bald eagles, ospreys, brown pelicans. Unfortunately, we didn't realize all of a sudden we were losing our bald eagles, which is the symbol of our country, and we didn't know why, because their shells, the shells of the babies, they'd give birth to the eggs, and the eggs were so thin that when they sat on them to incubate them, they'd crush them and kill the baby instantly, because the shells were like psychotically thin. I don't know if you've ever, messed with eggs and done the trick where you're pushing on the pointy end and the round end, and you're going like that. Eggs are actually structurally very strong. It takes a good whack on the side of the bowl to crack an egg open. So imagine how, and trust me, if you've ever messed with an ostrich egg, that thing's like, you needed like a hammer. But so imagine eagle eggs, they're designed to be sat on, they're designed not to crush. But the eggshell thinning was killing off our American bald eagles, and that's actually why they went into becoming a endangered species and under threat of extinction, because, and it wasn't until we started looking at, well, why are the eggshells thinning? They just don't thin out of thin air. What's going on here? It was the DDT. So it was the DDT we were using to kill off the mosquitoes, going into the waterways, bioaccumulating in the fish. And then when these beautiful birds would go down and eat the fish, because ospreys, eagles, brown pelicans would be grabbing the fish, eating the fish, and it would start, the DDT starts bioaccumulating up and up and up and up and up inside the bald eagle. And then all of a sudden, what we found out is the DDT was changing the shell. So when the mother was pregnant or forming the eggs, and then when she finally laid the eggs, the DDT had destroyed the eggshell to the point it was paper thin. So when the mommy and the daddy, because they actually both take care of the eggs, sat on the eggs to incubate them, smush, no more babies. So we had to instantly cut out DDT to save our bald eagles. So yeah, that's where bioaccumulation is not our friend. And we're seeing it right now with plastics, but we've seen it before in the past with things like DDT. And this is something we have to be very, very aware of, like mercury. That's why they say, pregnant women shouldn't eat a lot of fish, even though technically fish is good for you. But depending on the fish and how you fry it. You're not supposed to fry it, but whatever. Anyway. Yeah. But yeah, mercury is another one, because a mercury unfortunately gets into the waterways and everything, because it builds up. It's a waste product of industrial processes, not prices. And unfortunately, these guys absorb, and then we eat them, and then we're getting a whole bunch of mercury in our body. And remember, I think I told you about mercury, how it goes up because our body doesn't know what to do with it. So what does it do? It puts it all over your brain, and now your brain can't talk to each other, and you're going, and then you die like the first emperor of China, because he went crazy and died because he was drinking straight mercury, because the sages back then told him it would make him live forever. No, it did not. Yeah, did not. So that is why biomagnification and bioaccumulation, we need to be very aware of this, of our impacts upon the environment like that. We've already seen it with DDT, and we saved the eagles. They're off the endangered species list, but we don't want to repeat. But unfortunately, we're repeating it with all the plastic in the ocean. Go us. So anyway, so biochemical cycles. So this is a flow of substances from non-living to the living and back to the non-living, and it's called the cycling of substances. And your book touches on this, and I'm just going to touch on this too. I'm not going to beat you with it. So there's a cycling of chemical elements like carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and water. And in the biosphere, it's called the biogeochemical cycle, and it operates through the soil, water, air, and biotic factors. So this is constantly like the water cycle. You remember the water cycle, right? Yeah, well, guess what? That's like the first one. Dun, 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 dun. And like, you've been hopefully seeing the water cycle since kindergarten, maybe? I'm not entirely sure when they first introduced you to the... When do you remember getting first introduced to... Do you? I don't. It's been so long because you're always getting introduced to the water cycle. So we hopefully you all know the water cycle by this point. So again, the carbon cycle is another one. We touched on this back when we touched on the plants. So carbon cycle, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, marine photosynthesis. So they suck it up, weathering of rocks, basically microbial respiration and decomposition. And the plants take it in, and then we get it from the plants, and we also kick it back out again. So the plants take it in, goes around and around. Unfortunately, we've upset it with human emissions, because it used to be plants suck it in, turn it into glucose, then we take the glucose, turning it into ATP, kick out the carbon dioxide, and it goes around and around. And of course, with the weathering of rocks and whatnot, and plants absorbing it from the land and everything else. And same thing in the ocean, marine photosynthesis sucks it up there. But human emissions have put more carbon in, and that kind of messes things up. So we've had to kind of like watch that, or else we could throw this out of whack real easy. So that's the carbon cycle in a nutshell. We did talk about the nitrogen cycle and nitrogen fixing. Because bacteria, algae, plants, they all do nitrogen fixing, because I'm the most of the nitrogen is in our atmosphere. And like I said, back in the plant kingdom, we can't breathe in nitrogen and use that nitrogen. We can't use gaseous form. So we need bacteria, we need algae, we need plants to do nitrogen fixation for us, so we can get nitrogen in our systems by eating them. So thank you for fixing our nitrogens. The NFTs, those nitrogen fixing trees. Then you got the phosphorus cycle. Again, it's aerosol. It goes into terrestrial food webs. Phosphorus is really important if you go into anatomy and physiology, because we talk about a lot about him and how it's used in our body. But again, phosphorus is also a part of the cycle that we need. The sulfur cycle, nobody talks about this one. So this one's kind of probably like, what? I don't even think your book covers it, which is interesting. Your book just covers, where is it? Sorry, I'm just curious. Where'd it go? There it is. So it does water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and stops there. Interesting. So it doesn't even talk about the sulfur cycle. So there is a sulfur cycle. We actually get it from eruptions into the atmosphere. So atmospheric sulfur, which unfortunately, if we have too much of, then we get sulfuric rain, acid rain, which is not good. That was a major issue in the 80s. You guys, I don't know if you remember, probably not, because I barely remember myself because I was born in the 80s, but the sulfur cycle is a major thing. So human emissions, we put it along, and if we had too many, like in the 70s and the 80s, it was just, look up the differences between smog in the 70s, Google it sometime, and smog now. And here in America, because we have the EPA for a reason. Some people go, EPA bad? No. Look at the differences between pictures taken in the 70s versus now. And the cleanup of our air is freaking amazing. And it was hopefully putting the sulfur cycle back to where it should be, because we really made it out of whack, and we had acid rain that destroyed crops. It was bad. So yeah, 70s, 80s. Yeah, look it up some. I wonder if I can say it right quick. I'm sorry. No, 70s air pollution versus now. Let's see if there's an image. Yeah. So check that out. That's New York City, I believe. So New York City now. Oops. Yeah. 1973 versus 2013. Guys, this is why we have the EPA. So don't let anybody sit there and say, oh, the EPA, we don't need it. Unless you want to breathe this, we need the EPA. Just saying. Yep. Okay. Anyway, so there you go, sulfur cycle. Oh, yeah. Okay, we're at the end of these ones. All right, so I want to go ahead and slap this in real quick. So biodiversity. So we're going to just talk about this super fast. Again, biodiversity is important. So biodiversity is a number of given different species in a given area, involves cataloging all the species on Earth, which has been interesting because sometimes we find new ones constantly. So there's about estimated at 1.7 million known different species, and the actual number may be closer to 10 million, but good luck finding everybody because like we said earlier, the oceans, we're still trying to find everything down there. That doesn't eat us. So could there be a megalodon down there? I don't know. And at the same time, I don't want to find out. The ocean scares me, which is why I stay in the mountains. So there's 3 types of biodiversity for the variety of life. There's genetic diversity, which is the variation of traits and genes within the species. There's species diversity, which is how many species are in an ecosystem. And then there's ecosystem diversity, which is the variety of different ecosystems and habitat types in an area of land and water. So basically, it's not yet clear why biodiversity increases closer to the equator. Probably has to do with energy because the sun's hitting the equator more, but the closer you go to the equator, the more species. I mean, think about it. That's where we've got the rainforest right here when we're not mowing it down for cattle pasture. Yeah, keep an eye on Brazil. Because whoever's in control of Brazil really controls what they're doing with the right now. They've got a guy in control that does not care if they mow down the rainforest again. So keep an eye on Brazil because usually this is where other country politics definitely plays into the rest of us living. Anyway, so one factor may be greater age of the ecosystems. Usually they're a lot older down here versus up there. Because they're usually devoid of life during like the last glaciers. Because remember, glaciers move towards from the poles down, or up from the bottom and down from the top if we're having a glacier period. Another explanation is increased energy from the sun versus everybody else. So the polar regions aren't getting as much sun as the equator is. So again, energy tropic levels. So tropical ecosystem complexity may promote speciation, increasing the heterogeneity, which is basically the number of ecological niches that are found in the tropics is different. I mean, but different than everywhere else. So basically, tropical ecosystems have way more biodiversity, which is known as heterogeneity. So however, this suffers occasionally depending on what's going on, especially like, holes in our atmosphere, fun stuff like that. So, there's also, cycles happening within cycles. But so why there's more diversity across the equator is still hotly debated, even though we've got 2 really good ideas, but at the same time, nothing's nailing down perfectly. This is why, like I said, in these kind of chapters in the back of your book here, it's always changing, always fluxing. All right, so the balance. So the number of species on the planet in any geographical area is a result of an equilibrium of 2 processes, which is speciation versus extinction. Both are natural because birth and death were just staples of life. That what was it? No, I can't think of it. Ben Franklin said the only staples in life is birth, death, and taxes. Anyway, except animals don't have taxes. So anyway, processes of macroevolution, when speciation rates outstrip extinction rates, number of species goes up. Likewise, if the number of species will decrease when extinction rates begin to overtake speciation rates. And that leads us to one of my favorite discussions, and that is we've had 6 major mass extinctions, and we're in the middle of one right now. So on the planet, life has had to bounce back 6 times, which is absolutely nuts to think about. That life almost got wiped out 6 times on this planet, and life basically went, oh, and restarted. Talk about one resilient planet. So some of these, we have all the fossil record of these extinctions, but we have no idea what causes them. Some of them we do know what caused, and some we don't. And that's actually kind of scary in the fact that, like, there's about 3 that we just really don't know what caused them. We know something happened, but we don't know what. So the first one was the Ordovician Silurian extinction. And basically, we think there was a major glaciation event. In other words, we turned into snowball Earth, and then a heating event that turned us, and it removed a lot of carbon dioxide from the air, causing global cooling and glacier formation. So we snowballed Earth because plants went crazy. So plants overdid it, and we got snowball Earth. And this led to a drop in the sea levels, a reduce in habitat, and we had a major die-off. Since most fauna was marine, about 86% of all the life on Earth was lost. Isn't that crazy? So 86% lost there. Next up is the late Denovian extinction. This one's a pretty big one, and we're still not entirely sure what the heck happened with this one. Basically, about 70% of all life died off during this period. One theory thinks that basically plants developed deep roots, releasing abundance of nutrients that felled algae, and there was a mass algae bloom. Because if you've heard about algae blooms, did I mention it? I thought I mentioned it. Algae blooms, if an algae bloom happens at a place of water, it can actually suck out all the oxygen out of a body of water, and then all the fish and all the other creatures die that need oxygen, and the algae just wipes everything that isn't it out, and then it dies itself. So algae blooms are dangerous and will pretty much wipe out all the oxygen in the water and kill off pretty much everything that's living in the water if an algae bloom happens. That's why they're like, ooh, algae bloom bad. So same thing here. They think a big algae bloom happened and it sucked out all the oxygen out of the ocean, suffocating a lot of things. However, that's just a thought. Another one is another snowball Earth happened, and that is what possibly happened. So this one's up in the air, but we do have the record for it, and we lost about 75% of life on Earth. So we're not sure if giant algae bloom happened or snowball Earth round 2. Not sure. Number 3, the Permian Triassic experience. This one was the deadliest. It was 96% loss of life on Earth. That's insane. So they think volcanic activity put way too much greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, made it too thick, we got too hot, and then basically we turned into way too hot Earth. So the opposite of snowball Earth. We went, and it made the ocean and rain very acidic and pretty much killed off almost everything. So that's what we think happened there. 4, Triassic, Jurassic. Again, 80% loss. We're not entirely sure what the cause of this one. So this is the one that basically we're not sure what happened on this. We think there could be a whole bunch of eruptions that happened this one, or an asteroid impact. This is not the one that killed the dinosaurs. Okay, that's the next one. So, but it made way for the dinosaurs' ancestors. So this one gave rise to what would become the dinosaurs in a minute. But basically, we know 80% of life was lost during this, and it was weird because I think most of it was in the oceans and not a lot in the land, which was really weird. This one's a funky one. This one's a real funker. And this one still has a lot of people just going, we're not sure what happened here. This one, if this one's a hit or miss, this one's a major hit or miss. Like, these 3 are just kind of like, we know what happened here because we could see the chemistry and whatnot, but these 3 are kind of like, we think, but don't have the best way of going, maybe. And like one of them, it's like a lot of the life died on the ocean, but all the life on the land survived, which was really weird. So the 5th one, of course, is the famous one. Asteroid hit Earth, made basically the Gulf of New Mexico, and killed the dinosaurs. So the impact would have ejected enormous amounts of debris in the atmosphere, causing global temperatures to drop. And because dinosaurs didn't have the ability to make coats, they died. Haha. Also, it caused local fires, earthquakes, tsunamis, acid rain. So everything was going crazy because a giant asteroid hit us and made the Gulf of Mexico. And dinosaurs go bye-bye, which led for the mammals to rise, the rise of the mammals. And unfortunately, we're going through the Holocene extinction right now. The Holocene extinction, unfortunately, we're still trying to figure out if this is a true extinction event or not. And unfortunately, what's going extinct are birds. We are seeing a massive drop in birds and other animals across the board. And it could be normal, or it could be because we're here. So, or it could be both. So we could be going through a normal background extinction, and I'll explain what a background extinction is right now, but it could be accelerated to the fact because we're here. So yeah, we are losing a ton of bird species. We're losing other species out of the other kingdoms as well. And like I said, this could be a normal. It could be accelerated because it could be a normal that's becoming accelerated because of our impact on the environment. So that one's kind of a big argument right now, but we know we're going through an extinction event right now, and we've got a hand in it, unfortunately. One way or another, we've got a hand in it. So yay. So again, what's the difference between background versus mass extinctions? So background extinction is the ongoing extinction of an individual species, and this happens on and off all the time, even without us stupid humans hanging out and making it worse. Like, for instance, I was talking about that one hummingbird that only feeds off one flower, and something happens and that flower dies, and all of a sudden, yeah, that bird's going to go extinct too, because he just lost the only thing that he can feed from, and he can't change quick enough to, save the species. So that happens all the time. Unfortunately, also for us humans, the way of the dodo, unfortunately, we hunted them to death because it wasn't because the dodo was stupid. It was because it was an actually incredibly curious bird and had never seen humans before. So it would walk right up to us and be like, "What are you?" So I bet they were actually quite intelligent. It's just they didn't recognize us as a danger until it was their shot, which sucks. Because it sounds like they would have made interesting pets. Sucks. Anyway. So, I mean, imagine like a turkey following around like a dog, like, "Hi, what are you doing?" "Oh, that's cool." Anyway, because they're really curious birds. So they weren't stupid. They were just, they'd never seen a human and they didn't know what a gun was. And by the time they knew, it was too late. Go us. So anyway, and it's not necessarily us causing it. And this usually happens over a long time. This is a regular process, a part of evolution. Some species get out competed and they just, ain't going to make it. Or it's just the end of an era, and maybe like a subspecies split off and they're more, that things change over time. That's the whole part of evolution. It's like you don't see Nokia phones running around much anymore. Although now they're like apparently what is it? Gen Z? What's after the millennials? Gen Z? Yeah. They're interested in what's old is new again. So they're interested in all the older technology. So Nokias are kind of coming back, but you really don't see like Blackberries. When was the last time you saw a Blackberry phone? Yeah. Or do you even know what a Blackberry phone is? Yeah, they're gone. They're the way of the dodo. But that's competition. It's like the better technology is going to win out. You know what I mean? So you see that in cell phones. It isn't just life. It just happens on a bigger scale in life. But you see it in technology too. It's like, let's talk about some things that don't exist anymore, like Blockbuster Video. It's like, hey, where's Blockbuster? Yeah, and here's Netflix now. Netflix killed Blockbuster. And now Netflix is kind of getting slightly killed by, just hanging out on YouTube. So it's happens in capitalism too. So anyway, so this is background extinction is something that happens regardless. Now, mass extinction is basically where a whole bunch of animal species go dead within a very short time. It's usually caused by rapid things, global changes, huge, Earth meet asteroid, and that's why NASA actually has an entire department dedicated to watching asteroids. We do. We actually have an entire asteroid tracking group in NASA. So when you sit there and say NASA doesn't do anything for us, yeah, no, they track asteroids to make sure that nobody's coming to make us go bye-bye like the dinosaurs. And that's actually why we ran a probe into an asteroid, because we were seeing how much it changed orbit. So if one's coming at us, we can actually know the math for knocking it out of orbit so it won't hit us, to protect ourselves. So yeah, NASA do important things like make sure dinosaur doesn't repeat. So anyway, so background extinction happens. Mass extinction, like I said, there's only been 6, and we're in the middle of one. So let's keep it to 6, shall we? I think that would be nice. Anyway, so why is this so important? So cleaner air and water, as you saw that one picture, nature-based solutions to climate change, like, living with the land, which is something we've got the technology to do it, guys. We just need to do it. I'm not saying, electric cars are kind of because the batteries take strip mining for lithium, and so that's a major trade-off. You've got to look at both sides on that. Now, this is coming from somebody who drives a Prius, okay? But there's something we can do. Like, we really need to up solar panels. Like, I think honestly, if we get solar panels pretty much on every house built from here on out, the South could rise again just from powering the North with all the sun we get down here. Honest to God, the only thing that's holding us back is companies like Duke Energy, because they don't want to lose their foothold in the economy. And I get that, but at the same time, dude, we could be doing so much more. Like the South, we get so much sunlight down here. If we just slap, just a solar panel on houses, just because, and build it in, we could, like I said, we could be self-sufficient. The South will rise again through solar power, man. Let's do it with solar power. Let's take over. Yeah. Anyway, resilience to storms and flooding. Again, basically global, I like to call it global weirding, because this is, yeah, we're getting warmer, but at the same time, it's kind of a yo-yo effect, and I can't get into it all the way here, but anyway, but yeah, unfortunately, it makes it worse for storms. They get worse and worse and worse, but it also concerns our health, food security. And like I was talking about a couple ways ago, the reason Al-Qaeda got so big is because there was a drought in Syria. And because of that drought, a whole bunch of farmers got kicked out of, their farms, basically, because it's a drought and you can't, and now you've got desert instead of a farm. And then you've got a bunch of unhappy people crammed into cities with no jobs, and it makes for very, very unhappy people. And because they're so unhappy, they're more likely to get recruited by groups like hate groups like Al-Qaeda and whatnot. You're going to see more and more of that environmental things like that, like droughts, widespread droughts, forcing people into cities, not having enough jobs for everybody, and more civil unrest. You're going to see that around the world, and that drives huge politics, including wars. So that's a major thing. So food security and like water security, that's huge. And natural medicine and pharmaceuticals, we're always finding new things. Mental health support, guys, we need nature. Going out into nature actually helps elevate our mood. Like I said, we actually can smell things in the dirt that actually gives us a boost of serotonin. So yeah, go sniff some dirt. Not the stuff that has straight poop in it, but go dig a hole and sniff some dirt, and it'll actually improve your mood. It's actually because we can detect microbes in the soil to tell us that the soil is good. So, because we're an agricultural species, it's kind of interesting. Also healthy economics, resistance to shocks like disease, recreation and tourism, livelihoods and job creation. Again, like I said, drought destroys job creation and livelihoods, and then makes a whole bunch of people unhappy, and then you get civil unrest, and then that leads up to terrorist groups and wars and all sorts of insanity. So again, this is, our environment impacts every part of our life, and I don't think a lot of people really realize just how much it does that. So anyway, this brings me to my last interesting tidbit for you for this semester, and that is the seed vault. Because of global warming, because of, well, we fear, another asteroid, even though NASA's doing a darn good job of tracking all the asteroids coming at us. Thank you, NASA. In the 1920s, we got together pretty much, all the agricultural departments have basically come together and said, hey, we should do something just in case the worst happens. And we made the seed vault. And this is in 2008. So I'm going to butcher this, so I apologize. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault began storing seeds from around the world as a backup system to regional seed banks. See, every country keeps their own seed banks. That way we have seeds on reserve, so that way if the farmers desperately need them, if something happens to the crop, we have a seed backup, so that way we can restart again the next year. However, so every country has a seed bank. It's interesting, in World War II, actually, Russia defended their seed bank to the point where the people who were in the scientists that were in the seed bank, they were defending it from the Germans to the point they starved to death, surrounded by food. They could have eaten those seeds to live, but they did not. They did not touch them. They all died of starvation, protecting those seeds so Russia could eat. Is that not insane? So same thing, seed vaults are very, very important. And if something happens, it can restart our agriculture, so that way we can bounce back faster. However, so we built basically into the side of a freaking, glacier up north. We basically built this huge underground system. It's called the Global Seed Vault. And that way, if a regional area loses their seed vault, something horrible happens and their seed vault gets destroyed, this seed vault is a backup for everything around the world. And it's in a cold place to help ideal temperature to make the seeds survive forever, humidity for survival. It's deep underground, so it means failure of systems will not compromise the climate inside. So these seeds are very, 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 very protected. Until global warming started making it leak. Yeah, that's lately it's been leaking because it's been getting warmer there. So we've got to kind of figure out how to save the global seed vault. But that's the whole point. If like something drastic happens, we have the seed vault, so that way we can get the food production back. And that's important. So all the foods, all the seeds, even seeds of things we don't make food out of, are all protected in the Global Seed Vault. It's kind of like our doomsday backup. We hope we don't have to use it, but just in case, it's there. So that's the Seed Vault. That's the Global Seed Vault, and why it's important. And unfortunately, like I said, I think last year I was reading a report that it's leaking and water is seeping in because it's getting warmer in the area where they put it, where it should be cold. So, yay, global warming strikes again. Anyway, or global weirding. But anyway, so there you go. I just wanted to tell you about the Seed Vault, and that, yeah, we actually do think about the worst outcome together as a bunch of countries instead of yelling at each other 24/7. And we came together and made the Global Seed Vault. So we have everybody's seed vaults secured in one place just in case we need a backup for whatever reason. So the universe, if we all go Mad Max or whatever, remember, go here, get the seeds, restart our agriculture for humanity's survival. There you go. Anyway, so there you go. Like I said, I'm trying to think. Is all three of my brain cells? So, yep, that was the last lecture for this week, for the semester. And I'm going to, like I said, put up a whole bunch of study things you can do. And then I'm planning on opening the exam on Friday, so you can have the entire weekend to take it. I forget how many questions it is now. I'll get back to you on that. I'll tell you exactly. I'll break it down for you too. I might make another small video on Monday showing things and breaking it all down for you, so that way you've got it. Or playing bingo with you. I might do a bingo. And also, please take the PLO test. That's an automatic 100, no matter what you make on it. I'm just going to go in there, take the scores out, and then I'm going to force a 100 in there for each one of you. So please take that. That actually is important information for me to see where I need to fix my education for next year. You know, my education. That's information for me. And if anything else, make another video. I know I promised I might make a Monty video. I think I'm still going to do that. So I might do that on Monday, make you a quickie history of Monty with Monty. He's in the middle of digesting something, so he'll wake up Monday maybe. Not that I care. I'll just pull him out. He'll be like, what? Trying to think what else. If you've got any questions, or like I said, if you need anything else opened to like do, or please email me, hit the remind on me, you know, let me know, because like I said, everything shuts on May 9th and there's no coming back from that. So if you need something reopened, if you need to get back into something to get something done, let me know, please, because I can't do anything. If you contact me Wednesday, May 10th, I can't do a thing for you, and I'm sorry. So that's why it's like, please get things done before May 9th. Trying to think. Yeah, I think that's everything. So be on the lookout for this week review for the exam. I'll put several things up for you, and might put up another video too. And then if you have questions, you know where I am. Please email or come on by and visit me. Anyway, with that said, I'll let you go. Have a good one. And I'll see you around, I guess. Have a good summer. Bye.